it's frankly extraordinary, that letter. I've read it several times today. And just to be clear, this was a response to the Prime Minister of Norway, but also the President of Finland, who traditionally gets on really well with Donald Trump. I mean, let's just break down some of it. The tone, this is the leader of the free world. And at times, it sounds like this is the moanings of a petulant child, talking about, we had a boat that landed there too, we should have the rights as well. Also, really disturbing lines. I no longer feel an obligation to think purely of peace. That's going to be hugely worrying. I remember just a couple of weeks ago, various leaders of NATO countries were saying there's absolutely no way the US would think about invading Greenland to get hold of it. I mean, will this make them think twice? And then another line, which I think will have NATO leaders really feeling like they're banging their heads against a brick wall, is this idea that Denmark can't protect Greenland. And I think what I've heard from numerous leaders, whether it's the EU foreign policy chief, the Germans, people around the EU, is that they're not asking Denmark to protect Greenland alone. They're saying this can be done as part of NATO, and the US is obviously a key part. They're not saying you can't play a role in it. They're saying you should be playing a big role in this because you're a key member of NATO. And I think they'll be wondering, well, if you want more bases in Greenland, it's highly likely you can have them. If you're so worried about security, why have US troops been reduced from thousands to a few hundred? You know, if you want to have access to rare earth and other precious minerals on Greenland, you can apply for the permits. So they're saying you don't need to do this alone. It doesn't need to be us versus you. We can all do it under NATO and be safer together. They all agree that the Arctic does need more security. That's why they sent this exploratory mission last week, they say, that antagonised Donald Trump and led him to announce these potential tariffs on the 8 countries that did that. But they really aren't getting through, it seems, this message that we're not against you, we're trying to do this with you.
Just talk to us a little bit more about the EU, Siobhan, because there's talk, isn't there, of some pretty chunky tariffs in retaliation. 93 billion euros?
Yeah. Now, listen, I think the last year has been really tough at times for many EU leaders, and they've had to bite their tongue when it comes to dealing with the US president, particularly, for example, the way that he seems to have given Russia preferential treatment, the way he's treated President Putin in comparison to the rough treatment that we've seen for President Zelensky time and again. But I think what has happened now with these tariffs is many are saying enough is enough. They frankly, in many corners, are talking about bullying and that they have to stand up to bullies. We had a news conference today from the German Vice-Chancellor, and he said this: "I have no interest in an escalation and do not search for one. We're ready to find solutions. We're offering our hand, but we are not prepared to let ourselves be blackmailed." And similar messaging coming out from Sweden, for example. So what can the EU do? Well, listen, they don't want to pick a fight with the US. They have a huge trading interest with the US. They are key allies in NATO. So the first thing they're going to be looking to do, I think, is diplomacy and trying to send out some of those traditional Trump whisperers, particularly behind the scenes at Davos. So they've got this opportunity to try and do that. I know, for example, that the Germans are planning to have a meeting with Trump either on Wednesday or Thursday. If all of that behind the scenes whispering fails, then there's an extraordinary meeting of EU leaders on Thursday where they'll talk about next steps. Now, possible next steps are unfreezing, as you were saying, this 93 billion euro tariff package, which has been frozen since July, but could come back online against the US from the 6th of February. That's one option. Another option is the so-called trade bazooka. This is something that Emmanuel Macron, the French president, has been talking about over the weekend. This is the anti-coercion mechanism. It's never been used before in the EU, but if they unleash this, then essentially it would put restrictions on things like investments, banking, access to markets. It would be really painful. These are serious measures and they would hit the EU as well. But I do think many now are feeling that they've hit their red lines, that they have to stand up because, frankly, if they don't, what lies in front of them? They're letting a key ally bully them into submission, but also NATO can't really withstand the US just taking an area, territory that it wants by force. And so really we are now in extremely uncharted waters.